One time I did that, and in one of the little containers I had foam. Yeah. That was so much fun. Because when that gets in here, it just like instantaneously, I don't know, it's like sucks all the moisture out of your body or something. But I don't do that anymore. So I kind of got in trouble for that. In the 1980s, there was a movie called The Mission. And it was set in South America in the 1700s. The Mission was a group of Jesuit priests who had gone to South America to minister to the indigenous tribes. And when they got there, they realized that the Portuguese and the Spanish, attempting to sort of conquer the totality of the world, were raiding the indigenous tribes, kidnapping them and selling them into slavery. And so these Jesuit priests tried to protect these tribes. But because the government made a lot of money supporting the Spaniards and the Portuguese in their slave trading, they intervened and they told the Jesuit superior that he had to play along or he would be executed. So he tried to talk his fellow priests into allowing the slave traders to simply carry out their tasks. But the priests refused. And so finally, so frustrated with the Jesuit priests and their attempt to protect the tribes against the slave trade, they massacred an entire village, including the Jesuit priests. And a report was brought back to the Jesuit superior by one of the slave traders. And he's reading through it, and he said, by what effrontery could we possibly justify this massacre? To which the slave trader said, Your Eminence, such is the way of the world. The powerful always prey on the poor. To which the Jesuit superior said, No. Such is the world as we have made it. Last week we had that powerful text from Micah. What does the Lord require of thee but to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God? Today we have that powerful reading from Isaiah, where Isaiah says, Is this the fast that I choose? That you put on an outward piety, that you come and bow down low before the altar of God, and then leave the sanctuary only to cheat your neighbor. Is that the fast I choose? No, is this not the fast I choose? To release the bonds of injustice, to remove the yokes of slavery, to feed and to clothe the poor, to welcome the stranger into your midst. Then your light shall shine forth like the dawn. And it is these themes that Jesus picks up as we continue to read through the Beatitudes. Last week, blessed are the poor, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those who are meek. And today, we hear that we are to be salt and light. Salt and light. Now it's here we have to pause for a moment. Oftentimes, we confuse the function of Scripture. Martin Luther talked about how Scripture is that which reveals to us the Christ. It serves, Luther said, as law and gospel. As I read the pages, I realize, like the Jesuit superior, that the world isn't simply the way it is. The world is exactly as we have made it. And it serves as that mirror. It convicts me of my own sinfulness, and it drives me to the only source of hope, the cross of Christ. That's its function. It doesn't serve as a weapon where I can pull pieces out and throw them at someone else. It serves as a mirror. It reflects back to me how far I have fallen short of the hope in which God created me. We have people telling us today about the division. There's division religiously, division politically. But I don't buy it for a second. I don't believe we are as divided as people want to make us believe we are. Because ask yourself one simple question. If we are, in fact, as divided as those tell us, then why are they making so much money off of the division? It's not the way of the world. It's the way that we have made it. And we have made it that way because it serves our own interest. But that's not the way of the world. You see, the problem isn't out there somewhere. Which brings us to the second part. Jesus never said to his followers, go ahead and whine and complain about the way the world is. I hear a lot of whining, a lot of complaining, a lot of blaming. But somehow, well, that's the way the world is. No. No, Jesus tells us, that is exactly how we have made it. And so this text for today from Matthew calls us to be different. To act differently in the context of our world. And unless we think we can get off the hook, Jesus reminds us that he didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets. No, he came and they will stand until they are fulfilled. He said, you must be more righteous than the scribes or the Pharisees. But we must not just be different. We must be visibly different. A city on a hill cannot be hid. No one lights a lamp and then puts a bucket over it. We must, in fact, be visibly different. I used to ask this question of churches. You drive down any street in any town and you'll see churches. I would ask them, tell me about that church. And oftentimes they'd say, oh, I know it's a Methodist church or it's this church. I said, no, tell me about that church. They'll say, well, I know some people who go. I said, no, tell me. Tell me about it. And I'm met with silence. And yet here Jesus is telling us we must be visibly different. We must be that city that sits on a hill. Our light is supposed to shine forth, not for our sake, but for the sake of the community in which we live. Tell me what difference they're making. Is it visible? In the waters of baptism, we were claimed by God. We were marked with the cross of Christ forever. And we, as a community, not just the parents and sponsors, we as an entire community took an oath. We took an oath to bring this child to the services of God's house, to provide for her Christian instruction. That living in the covenant of her baptism and in communion with the church, she may lead a godly life, he may lead a godly life until the day of Jesus Christ. And then the pastor says, do you promise to fulfill these vows? And everybody always says, oh yes. Oh yes. And then at the end of that, someone hands them a candle and says, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works and glorify God who is in heaven. Visibly different. And we don't get off the hook here. You see, we took that vow. We took that oath. In a man for all seasons. A story about the life of Thomas More. Thomas More, now a saint in the Catholic Church. Thomas More was a contemporary of Luther's, though he was adamantly opposed to what Luther was teaching and preaching. But Thomas More found himself suddenly as the chancellor to King Henry. King Henry VIII, one of the most despicable human beings to ever live, a man who categorically slaughtered anyone who dared to cross him, anyone who dared to disagree with him. And in the end of his life, as he slowly and more profoundly transferred into his utter insanity, he started slaughtering everybody around him, even those who had been loyal to him. And he's locked in a battle with the Catholic Church. Now, Thomas More was not a priest, he was a lawyer. And he wanted the Catholic Church to annul his marriage so he could marry another, and the church said no. And so King Henry VIII simply declared himself the head of the church. And he demanded everybody take a vow, declaring him the head of the church, and Thomas More refused. So he was arrested for treason, and before he was executed, he was talking to his daughter, and he said, when a man takes an oath, he holds his life in his hands like water. If he breaks that oath, it's like opening your fingers. You lose your life, never to be found again. We are to make a visible difference. In a world that focuses on divisions and hatred, we are called to be loved. In a world bitterly divided by race and creed and color, we are called to be loved. To be visibly different. To be welcoming. To be caring. All for the sake of the world. And so this day let your light so shine before others that they may see your good work and glorify God in His name.